Hello and welcome to Learn and Talk's writing overview for the academic task 1 of the Ielts exam. We're going to talk about everything you need to know to do a good job. So what exactly is expected of you during the task 1? Well, you're supposed to write a report describing the trends you see in a graph or map. It should be at least 150 words long, and this is very important because if you write less than 150 words, you will score lower. So maybe you would score a 6, but if you write 130 words, you'll only get a 5.5 or maybe even a 5. Now, as this is formal writing, you have to avoid contractions like can't or didn't. Make sure to write in paragraph format, nicely organized, and of course you have to use correct grammar and spelling. Try to spend only 20 minutes to finish task 1 because remember, your writing contains both a task 1 and a task 2, and you only have 60 minutes to do both. As this is the shorter one, you should only spend 20 minutes on this, so you have a full 40 minutes for your task 2. So these are some of the graphs and tables and/or charts that you can expect to see in a task 1. You should be familiar with the different styles of graph that you can see. For example, here we have a line graph, we have a bar graph, and a table. Then some will include a map, some might include a pie chart, and some might include diagrams. You should be comfortable with each of these, and of course, we'll have separate individual lessons that go over these in far more detail. Just some basic advice for you, though, is to keep in mind on a map, think of where your north, east, south, and west are. That can be very helpful. And then for a diagram, we look at this example here and we see that it's about the stages of recycling aluminum drink cans. So the cans are at the collection center, then they go to the recycling center, then they go down to the aluminum recycling plant. There it goes through a whole cycle, and eventually new cans are put into drink machines, and this cycle continues and continues. When we look at a pie chart, these represent percentages, really, the colors. So you look at walking. 8 people chose their method of going to school as walking. 9 people chose to use car, and only 1 person uses a taxi, or sorry, a train, not a taxi. Taxi is 3. And so, when you look at that, you can see that the colors represent how many people said that, the percentages. And in this case, exact numbers are given as well. So when we write our response, how should we structure it? Well, you should have an introduction, an overall statement, and a couple of body paragraphs. So for your introduction, these sentences describe what information the graphs are showing. So you just want to keep it very basic, just literally saying what is in the graph. What does this graph show? So for example, on the pie chart on the last page, we could say this pie chart shows the means or the mode of transport that people choose to take to go to school. Easy. Then we go to the overall statement. This should be your second paragraph, and it says a summary of the topics and trends you will be discussing in your report. And this should be concise, specific, and outline your body paragraphs. What you're going to do here is say, overall, in this chart, the trend is that it increases or the trend is that it decreases. Find some overall trend in the chart or graph that you're looking at, and then describe it. And then you might describe some other major trends that you look into in more detail in your body paragraphs. So a rule of thumb for your body paragraphs is if there is a graph, so a graph and a table, then you have to discuss one of them in your first paragraph and the other one in your second paragraph. Otherwise, if you only have one chart and nothing else, then discuss the most important or the largest change in your first paragraph and talk about other changes in your second or third paragraph. Another important distinction is that in your introduction and your overall statements, you're talking about general trends. So generally increases, general decreases, but in your body paragraphs, that's where you give your exact numbers, your exact figures. Now, another very important thing to keep in mind is that you are just describing the data and not analyzing it or giving your opinion. So in the picture here, we can see, some oranges, and we have, these are oranges, describing it, and I love oranges, giving an opinion. So you should not give your opinion during your writing task 1. There's no opinions given. And there should be no analysis either. So you're not saying why the graph is changing. You're just saying the graph has changed, or, this has increased, this has decreased. It went up, it went down. You don't say, I think, and you don't say, it went up because. No. Okay? Now, let's take a look at an example. So for a practice task 1, we have this graph and table below give information about water use worldwide and water consumption in 2 different countries. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Of course, write at least 150 words. So let's take a look at this graph here. In this example, we can see the trend that global water use increased in all 3 sectors: agricultural, industrial, and domestic. That's the general trend. The water use has increased from 1900 to 2000. We will describe the changes, but not why they happen. And also notice that in this example, we actually have this line graph here, and we have a table. So we have to actually describe both of them. We should use one body paragraph to describe the line graph and one body paragraph to describe the table beneath it. Okay, and this is very important. Don't think you can just choose one and completely ignore the other. You do have to talk about both of them. Okay. Now let's look at another task here. So we have a second practice task, and this time, the graph below shows the consumption of fish and some different kinds of meat in a European country between 1979 and 2004. Again, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. So we look at this graph and we can see the general trends. You see, we have fish consumption stays mostly the same. Lamb and beef go down, they decrease, while chicken consumption increases. Okay. Now we're actually going to give you an example answer to this. So what would a good answer to a writing task 1 look like? Boom, like this. The text below is a sample of a very good answer. However, please note that there are various other ways to answer this question. So for our introduction, you can see we have essentially 5 different little paragraphs here. And you can see that it's 176 words, so we're okay. We've written more than 150 words. We're going to start with an introduction. The graph illustrates the changes in the amount of beef, lamb, chicken, and fish consumed in a particular European country between 1979 and 2004. So this is a great introduction because it's just literally saying what the graph shows. Then we have an overall statement. Overall, the graph demonstrates how the consumption of chicken increased dramatically while the popularity of the other meats decreased over the period given. That was the overall trend. Now we look at the body paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. In 1979, beef was by far the most popular of these meats, with about 225 grams consumed per person per week. Lamb and chicken were eaten in similar quantities, around 150 grams, while much less fish was consumed, just over 50 grams. So you can see here that already we have our body paragraphs divided into different groups, different ideas, but also that we're starting to see absolute figures here. We're seeing the 225 grams, specific figures from the from the chart. Lamb and chicken were eaten in similar quantities. Again, we're giving the exact number. So those belong in your body paragraphs, not in your overall statement and not in your introduction, but in your body paragraphs. So first we talk about in 1979. Then we look at, however, during this 25-year period, the consumption of beef and lamb fell dramatically to approximately 100 grams and 55 grams respectively. The consumption of fish also declined, but much less significantly to just below 50 grams. So although it remained the least popular of the foods, consumption levels were the most stable. Now you can see this paragraph compares the changes in beef, lamb, and fish. And then the final paragraph focuses just on chicken. So the consumption of chicken, on the other hand, showed an upward trend, overtaking that of lamb in 1980 and that of beef in 1989. By 2004, it had soared to almost 250 grams per week. So you are still trying to organize your thoughts, right? So here we have in 1979, where does everything sit? Then we have how do things change, and the changes are compared. And then finally, we just look at, okay, let's look at chicken now. What happened to chicken? So they're organized according to ideas and they give specific details. So this is a very good example of a very good answer to task 1. So I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions, please write them down to ask later. And of course, we will be going over in more detail on individual aspects of your writing task 1 through various lessons.